And of course, we stay with that story. Last night, President Cyril Ramaphosa fulfilling a promise he made during his State of the Nation address to appoint a minister in the presidency for electricity. In an earlier article, columnist Dludlu asserted there was still time for a power minister U-turn, adding that the new ministry will cause more confusion and turf wars and will grow an already bloated cabinet. John is also the CEO of the Small Business Institute and former editor of the Sowetan. He joins us now via Zoom. Mr. Dludlu, a very good morning to you. You wrote the article making a case for the president not to go ahead with the Ministry of Electricity appointment. Now that it's done, where to from here?
Yeah, there's a good morning. Good morning to the viewers, and thank you for having me. Well, our preference was that the president should not bloat the cabinet. We don't have a lack of capacity problem. We don't need more ministers. What we need is effectiveness of the 2 or 3 ministers that are in charge of Eskom, the Minister of Public Enterprises, the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, as well as the Minister of Finance. The president needed to get those ministers to see eye to eye on the issues of Eskom. Right now, we know it's an open secret that those ministers do not share the same view about what's causing load shedding and how we get out of load shedding. So obviously, we have to work with this new minister. He is a good person. There is nothing wrong with him, but the system is broken. What needed to be fixed was the system, not one individual, not adding another individual.
So what do we make of the retention of the energy minister and the interstate enterprises minister?
Well, to really look at this cabinet reshuffle, actually it was not reshuffle, it was just filling a few positions. We have to look at the president's allies. This was always going to be about rewarding loyalties, his political bouncers like Minister of Public Enterprises, as well as Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. They were rewarded by keeping their positions instead of being moved or dumped. His political opponents were punished. They've lost their jobs. So we have to look through the lens of the ANC and the president's own personal survival strategy. He needs those ministers of energy and Minister of Public Enterprises.
Do we know what the key performance areas for this new electricity minister are? One imagines the appointment of a group chief executive officer at Eskom becomes a priority on that list.
Well, I'm not so sure if that's actually part of his responsibility. My sense is that we're going to go on with the current system where the board identifies candidates, the board of Eskom identifies candidates, and then makes suggestions to the Minister of Public Enterprises, and then Cabinet endorses one of those names. I don't think he's got Dr. Cyril Ramaphosa has got powers to appoint the new Eskom chief executive. We also have to be very mindful of the fact that it's just complicated the situation now. If there were about 5 people interested in contributing or making their names available for selection as Eskom's next CEO, I think that list has now gone down to about 1 because of how confusing the current architecture is. You have those 3 ministers and a Minister of Finance, and then you've got the president on top of all of this. Sadly, it has not appeared to be managing the conflicts between his cabinet ministers.
You make me think of that Financial Mail story last week that said that one of the worst energy jobs in the world, just in terms of the CEO of Eskom. But then what are his priorities coming in? We were speaking to an energy analyst earlier, and they were saying that the problems of South Africa's energy provision have already been identified. For instance, 6 power stations are problematic. We know about those. There's been a root cause analysis, and there's that energy plan that came out. in July. Does that strengthen him coming in, or does he still have a lot more work to do?
I think he's got a lot more work to do. And typically with our country, what's going to happen now is more research, is more analysis of a problem that we already know. We've had this problem for the last 15 years. We really don't need another analysis. Let us just, what we have as a big problem, Desiree, is capacity to implement. We have, the president announced last year in July his energy action plan. That plan has been implemented, but half-hearted speed. So if there's any contribution Dr. Ramaphosa can make is to add speed and impetus in the current implementation in the agreed plan. And it's not an either-or situation whether we move away from coal to a low-carbon economy. We have to implement what we have agreed to right now. We don't have another luxury of trying to analyze what's ESCOM's problem. And he really needs to get all the role players to play their parts and keep a harmonious relationship with all the stakeholders.
Well, Andre de Ruyter was at ESCOM. We were talking of 18-month timeframes and sometimes slightly more than that, just in terms of resolving the issues with load shedding. With his appointment, can we look at bringing forward some of those timeframes?
I think it's possible. A year to 18 months must be a very generous and sufficient time to move the dial. But as I said, what he needs to get every one of those three stakeholders, the ESCOM board and management on the one hand, the policy ministry in mineral and energy, as well as the Department of Public Enterprises. And of course, you can't do much if you don't have the support of National Treasury. If he gets that right, which has been elusive up until now, I think he's got a chance of success in a year to 18 months.
So finally, President Cyril Ramaphosa announces that much anticipated leader of government work, the Deputy President Paul Mashatile. Where can he take the country?
You know, my fear, I'm quite nervous that Mr. Paul Mashatile becomes the next ace at a very early stage of the relationship with the president. We do know that it did not come through the president's slate. A conflict inside the ANC is better than the conflicts inside governments. You would recall that Mr. Ace Magashule was at Dludlu House, but that conflict also reverberated into government system as well. It would be very unhelpful if Mr. Mashatile became Ace Magashule overnight. If Paul Mashatile became Ace overnight, it will just make government system dysfunctional, and that will not be in the interest of resolving the current crisis.
That's really quite interesting what you're saying, and just judging off the history of the African National Congress and how they go about resolving these conflicts, do you see a light at the end of the tunnel?
Unfortunately, no. I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. The ANC is an old organization, and I think it's done quite a good job helping liberate South Africa, and in the last 30 years negotiating the transition and getting us up to here now. But unfortunately, they have run out of ideas. They have run out of capacity and talent. So we look at the president's appointments yesterday. They were always going to be uninspiring because of the selection pool he has. He has to choose from the 80 people in the NEC and from the alliance partners. He's not going beyond that. So for as long as that happens, I think we'll continue to shoot below our capabilities and potential.
And of course, that's the biggest challenge in the country. We honed in on the energy crisis more. But just looking at the overall picture of the announcement last night, Where were your hits? Where were your misses?
Obviously, I think the biggest hit is that he did not fiddle with what appears to work most of the time, which is the economic ministries, especially national treasury. That would have been disastrous. At least there's a bit of continuity there. There's a bit of continuity in the wider economic cluster. So that's a positive. But the other appointments are quite disappointing, sorry to say.
John Dludlu, thanks for your time this morning.